President Trump addresses the Israeli parliament called the Knesset. Much of my time today was consumed by this historic occasion or event, covered live by almost all important channels of the world. Since I've been dreaming of the re-establishment of peace in this much troubled area, I wanted to be a part of this ceremonial occasion when the President of the United States would address the Parliament of Israel. I thought I'd share with you a few thoughts in this regard. First of all, I was touched by the dignity of the entire event. The proceedings in the Israeli parliament struck me as full of dignity, decorum, and even a touch of human greatness. For example, the opportunity provided to the leader of the opposition, Yair Lapid, was as prominent as that of the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, though for much of the time in the last 2 years when the war was raging, Yair Lapid was nowhere in the picture. It was Benjamin Netanyahu all the way. But given the decorum that the Israeli parliament is particularly keen to uphold, they did not deviate from parliamentary propriety and stood by the principle that the leader of the opposition deserves as much respect and opportunity as the Prime Minister of the country. Now, I was wondering if the same scene was enacted in India, the Parliament of India, a similar situation would have been obtained, whether the leader of the opposition would have been given the kind of visibility, importance that Yair Lapid, the leader of the opposition in Israel, was given. And that shows the health of the Israeli democracy. And it must be pointed out that Israel is the only democratic country in the entire region. And therefore, it's all the more creditable that Israel stands by the fundamentals of democracy. Now, here, of course, you would readily recognize that I am not a blind admirer either of Israel or of Benjamin Netanyahu. If you have seen my previous videos, you will be left in no doubt that I am not a member of any cheer team or cheer squad. But nothing will prevent me from making objective and positive observations if that is consonant with truth. So there is something that I think we as Indians, members of a proud democratic country, the largest functioning democracy, as we are happy to say, there is something that we can learn from the way the democracy is practiced in Israel. Now, I listened with great attention and respect to the leader of the opposition in the Israeli parliament, Yair Lapid. He made a brilliant speech. Actually, Benjamin Netanyahu also made a brilliant speech, but he is known to be a good speaker. But it was for the first time that I was actually listening to Yair Lapid. I had read about him. I've known him from a distance as the leader of the opposition. And for some time, he also was prime minister. But it was for the first time that I was listening to him. And I must say that I was thoroughly impressed. And one of the ideas that he underlined is of very great relevance to us. He said, look at the difference between Israel and all of the countries around. Particularly look at the difference between Israel and Gaza. And then he said something extremely important. And every one of us needs to pay attention to this particular statement. He said, what is the difference? The difference is, in Israel made the greatest possible investment in her people, in providing good education, good research opportunities, good investment opportunities, quality of life, and social stability, health, etc. So the quality of life in Israel was heavily invested into, whereas those in the neighborhood, the famed axis of resistance puppeteered by Iran from a distance, they invested in hate and in violence. He said that makes all the difference, and I think it's very true. And that, there's much in it that we need to ponder over. Because I think we are committing the same mistake that many of the Arab countries have committed. No country in history has ever progressed or done justice to itself by allowing its soul to be poisoned with hate and negativity. Negativity cripples oneself. It does more harm to oneself than to one's supposed enemies. To create patriotic fervor mainly on the plank of anti-Pakistani or anti-Chinese sentiment, or now even to an extent anti-Bangladeshi sentiment, is an exercise in absurdity, because ultimately it takes a greater toll on us than on anybody else. So I think that's something that the leader of the opposition in Israel said with great rhetorical effectiveness. It caught my attention immediately, and I have to endorse the tremendous practical wisdom in the words of Yair Lapid. Then, of course, I have to make a reference to the speech by Trump. Trump recognized, in his own words, the wonder that Israel is. Now, all of us know that Trump is never tired of singing the praise of America. His life's mission is to make America great again. And you rarely see Trump praising another country. He's quite happy to say that all other countries in the world are dead. America alone is hot. But he was extremely loquacious and generous in praising Israel. And he called it the wonder in this region. He says, look at the tiny country that you are, and look at the miracles that you are performing. Now, in India, of course, we take pride in the thought that we are 145 crores. Our Prime Minister, at the drop of a hat, says, Mera 144 crore log, my 140 or 1.4 billion people. But what's the point in underlining the size of Indian population if the people are not empowered, if they are not developed to the maximum potential, if 35% of the country still remain illiterate, if only 2% out of the people enrolled in class 1 ever enter the college level, if unemployment level among the youth is as high as it is today, and if general frustration is spreading, what's the point in saying that we're a large country with the largest population in the world? We have outstripped China. Look at the miracle that a small country, perhaps 1/3 the size of Kerala, is performing. It's become the wonder of the world. I remember, my memory goes back to the 70s, when I used to visit Kuwait. Whenever I visited Kuwait, in those days I was very fond of cherries. The best cherries imported into, or rather smuggled into Kuwait, used to be from Israel. These cherries had to be smuggled into Kuwait because Kuwait had officially boycotted Israel. Hating Israel was a great national virtue. But when it came to eating the best cherries, they forgot all the hatred, and the Kuwaitis had absolutely no problem in eating Israeli made cherries because they're obviously the best in the world. That is where quality cuts the path for you. That is actually where we must posit or situate our patriotism. Let us make India great again. Let us aim at the highest possible level of quality. But to do that, we have to renounce the luxury of hatred and negativity. And this most senseless project of excluding millions and millions of people, for example, even preparing voters list. The great emphasis is on excluding as many people as possible, labeling all of them as infiltrators from Bangladesh. And if you ask for a list of the intruders, then there is a deafening silence. So this kind of thing will not help us. It's actually hurting us. It is crippling us. India will become great only if all Indians are empowered to develop to their full capacity and also to make their contributions to the maximum possible extent, so that together we constitute a nation. A nation infected with negativity, with alienation, with hatred, with mutual suspicion has no future. This is a national disease. We have to heal ourselves. I have never doubted the greatness of the Indian soul. I believe in the stupendous genius that India is. But I feel sad that we have never been able to do justice to the genius of India. Not only when India was under foreign domination for a very long period of 1,000 years, that itself proves that there is something wrong with us. But we never understand the problem, right? Therefore, we are trying to invent scapegoats and load all the blame on somebody else. We will improve only if we correct ourselves. There is something to be corrected. Unfortunately, rather than correct the mistakes, we continue with along the same path and revel in the psychology of negativity, which does enormous harm to us, and the sooner we realize, the better. And in fact, the plight of India today is good enough reason for us to be honest and truthful about it. There is no point in play acting. We cannot shut our eyes and believe that whatever we say will wash in the global arena. We will be judged objectively by the world beyond our borders. We will be respected for the quality of life that we maintain. We will be respected for the level of development that we achieve. We will be respected for the ideals and values that we uphold in our national life and social context. We cannot entertain archaic values and notions, prejudices, and expect to be accepted as Vishwaguru, unless, of course, we want to create a cult of irrationality for ourselves. So, Trump acknowledging the greatness of Israel. In fact, the word he used is miracle. Miracle is a loaded word. He says Israel is a miracle. I would love to hear somebody say before I die, India is a miracle. How wonderful, how great that would be. So that's the first thing I want to say as far as Trump's speech is concerned. Then he said something very significant to his very bosom friend, Benjamin Netanyahu, whom he always calls Bibi, Bibi, Bibi. He told Bibi, he said, look, there is a time to fight and there is a time to stop fighting. There is a time for war, there is a time for peace. You cannot be at war with the whole world. And he actually meant you cannot be at war with your neighbors. Now, Trump, of course, would never say, nor would it be right on his part to say, that the enmity between Israel and its neighbors is entirely of Israel's making. It's a very complicated situation whose historical roots go back a long time in history, and therefore Benjamin Netanyahu cannot be blamed entirely for this very unfortunate situation that prevails in this region. And I quite appreciated Trump's repeated affirmation of his unwavering commitment to make this region a region of peace and prosperity for all people. And I will not distrust it until he contradicts it himself and hold on to it as a very beautiful prospect. This region is so rich in resources that there is no reason why a single person should be denied quality of life in the most enviable fashion. But look at the plight of people in Gaza. Not only after the hostilities broke out, even before. The terrible disservice that Hamas did to the people of Gaza is that all the funding that Gaza received, instead of being used for the good of the people, was misused to create a war machine, a machine of hatred, and to create a very, very extensive, complicated network of underground tunnels. 500 kilograms of underground tunnels. I can imagine how much money has been diverted into it. Hamas did not get foreign funding to create these underground tunnels. Foreign funding came in order to develop the people of Gaza, but they were deprived of these facilities. Instead, all the resources were diverted. So, this unfortunate situation hopefully will change. And therefore, Trump declared his intention in very unambiguous terms that Hamas is not going to return, that Gaza will be demilitarized, Hamas will be disarmed, and a board of peace will be in place for a certain period of time. I hope that this board of peace will not be looking after or overseeing the affairs of Gaza beyond a limited period of time. Ultimately, every people group in this world deserves the right to decide for themselves. Nobody else has the right to preside over their destiny. It's their affairs that they should be free to look after themselves. So, this idea, this message that President Trump gave in very clear terms to Bibi, that Israel has to now learn to live in peace with its neighbors. That's a message that is globally valid because, as I've said in some of my previous videos, one of the lessons that history teaches us is that all wars are between neighbors. Therefore, the grace to live peaceably with one's neighbors is very rare in this world. We ourselves, India has to improve ourselves in this regard. I remember during Vajpayee's time, when I.K. Gujral was our foreign minister, external affairs minister, the relationship between India and the neighboring countries improved very dramatically. So it is not as though we cannot try and improve our neighborly relationships. It is that unfortunately, the whole cult of violence, negativity, etc., that seems to have taken possession of us, spills over beyond our borders and creates this ambience of negativity, which is not working to our advantage at all. So this message that every country has to now learn to live at peace with its neighbors is universally valid, and I feel happy that President Donald Trump declared it in emphatic words from the podium within the Knesset of Israel. Another very positive aspect of Trump's speech that struck my attention was that President Trump, though he is considered an unrivaled megalomaniac, is humble enough to acknowledge with appreciation and respect the roles played by others, the contributions made by others. Particularly, he singled out every member of his own team. For example, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the Chief Negotiator Steve Witkoff, Secretary of War Hegseth, Peter Hegseth, his own son-in-law Jared Kushner, and so on and so forth. Now, he singled out every one of them, made them stand up, and allowed the Israeli parliament to applaud them. I doubt if the same thing will happen in India. We are used to the single man, monolithic obsession. Only one man should be seen, only one man should be given all the honor and glory. All others should fade into insignificance and, in fact, ideally become invisible. Now, this is very crude. There is much grace and dignity in giving everybody his due. There is great justice in allowing everybody to play his or her role. It does not reflect positively on a leader that he wants to use others as mere foils to himself, just to sharpen the contrast, so that all honor and glory descends entirely on him and nobody else gets even a modicum of credit. Now, Trump, in comparison, is far more generous. And I think that's what we should be. After all, ultimately, it's teamwork. You may not want to acknowledge it, but the truth of the matter is it is teamwork. One man cannot deliver the goods. He may go up to a point, even if he works 24/7 all the days of the year, he can only go up to a certain point. The rest of the time, all the time, others are doing their work. And you don't lose anything by giving other people the credit that is due to them. So that is something that I found very positive in Donald Trump's speech today. But before I close, I have to point out that there was something that disappointed me in Trump's speech. He acknowledged God's guidance in all this. He gave thanks to God for causing this day to come to pass. But how did he? And that is quite all right. I'm not an atheist, so I quite appreciate if God's blessings or God's role is acknowledged. But I also believe that God works only through human beings, and God works through people of good intentions. And therefore, even as we acknowledge the blessings of God, we must also give everybody the credit that is due to them, as I've already said, which in this case, Donald Trump was not found wanting in. Now, he referred to God, and that's where my disagreement with Trump lies. He referred to God in the typical Israeli fashion, Jewish fashion, of God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. Now, this is the Old Testament idea of God. It's a patriarchal idea of God. In the patriarchal context, a God is known only through the patriarch. The equation is between the God of a tribe and the chief of the tribe. So it begins as the God of Abraham, and after Abraham's time, it's God of Isaac, the son of Abraham, and after Isaac's time, it's God of Jacob, the son of Isaac. Now, is that all? I would have been happier if Trump had said something far more historically correct, even by the biblical evidence. The Old Testament does not present the God of, does not present Yahweh or God as merely God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, but also as God of Ishmael. Now, this, of course, would sound very blasphemous. If you really think for a moment, how can this God be not also the God of Ishmael? After all, Ishmael was born to Abraham. And you acknowledge God as the God of Abraham. How can the same God be not God of Abraham's son? Of course, you would say that the son was born of Hagar, who was a servant girl. But who presents Hagar, the servant girl, to the old man to sleep with her? It was Abraham's wife, Sarah. And she did it because of her incapacity. She was barren. So at least she thought she was barren forever. So this poor woman was not to be blamed. It was not that she leapt into Abraham's bed on her own. She was obliged to do so. She was obliged to bear a son. And She was forced into it by Sarah. So am I to believe, are you to believe, that a life which is born of Abraham and Hagar is not of any concern to God? God is so partisan that God can smile only at Abraham's children via Sarah. The birth of Ishmael, if Ishmael also holds the same life that every human being holds, that's what the Bible says, then how can God be not of God of Ishmael also? I don't understand this. Now, that is something I would like us to reflect on. There's a reason why it suddenly stops at Jacob. You can't really acknowledge God as God of Ishmael also, because then it will become a God of peace, not of war. The Jews always wanted God of war. They recognized God, they valued God, they worshiped God primarily as the God of war, not God of peace. You read the Old Testament. To the Jews, Yahweh was the greatest warrior of all, and his prime duty was to ensure the victory, the impossible victories of the Jews. So what happens if God is acknowledged also as the God of your enemy? What happens? Then you can't fight. Then you have to accept peace. So Trump, insofar as he was exhorting Bibi or Benjamin Netanyahu to now consider seriously of living at peace with his neighbors, should have referred to God in connection with the establishment of peace in this region, not only as the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, but also as God of Ishmael, which would have been theologically also correct, though neither Jews nor Christians would like it. In fact, I'm sure that many Christians would be very upset with me for saying so. But this is a fact. Unfortunately, what happens is we deposit all our prejudices and biases on God. We do not give freedom to God to be truly God. We value God only to the extent that God is partisan towards us. At the same time, the Bible says that God can never be partisan. But we have no value for a God who is not partisan to us. For example, even Christians acknowledge God as Almighty. Almighty. Some months back, I posted a video in this YouTube fellowship saying that God is absolutely powerless, because God cannot be absolutely powerful and absolutely good at the same time, given the way the world is. So I said, I can understand that God is absolutely good, but he has to be absolutely powerless. Oh, it elicited terrific negative reactions. People were shocked. That made me reflect. You know why people are so happy to affirm that God is Almighty? Because they have use only for an Almighty God. After all, why do we turn to God? Why do we take the name of God? Why do we pray to God? Why do we try to keep God well-humored? Because we want to use God. We want to attain all our impossible dreams, unmerited advantages through God. And how can a God who is not absolutely powerful oblige us in these extravagant, outlandish, covetous desires? So we worship God not because we care for God. We worship God only because we want to make use of God. This is something we have to be honest enough to acknowledge. That is the reason why all religions are made up of fear, not of love. Nobody loves God. If anyone says that he loves or she loves God, think twice. You may be uttering a terrible blasphemy because you're uttering falsehood, deliberate falsehood about God. You don't love God. You value God only to the extent that God can be very, very beneficial, profitable, convenient to you. And the moment you're convinced that it is not so, you're likely to kick the dust off your feet and go. This is the honest truth. So, Donald Trump, for all his commitments to establish enduring peace in this region, will not walk that extra mile of now saying to the whole world that God is not only God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, but also God of Ishmael. And that is what he should have said, for that is the truth. And the same God is also the God of all Indians, all Africans, all Chinese, people all over the world. God is the Father of everyone. That's the reason why I find it extremely difficult to hate anyone, including those we are obliged by our negative patriotism to hate, both within the country and beyond the country. So, will peace reign in this region? I would have said there's a good chance if, through all this experience, all this trauma, the thinking in this region has been oriented towards recognizing the truth, the most fundamental critical truth, that the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob is also the God of Ishmael. That is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. And unless and until this truth is recognized, I'm afraid peace will not prove perpetual in this region. I hope to God that it does, but unless and until we create the foundation for peace, merely longing for peace is wishful thinking. We have to accept what it takes to establish, to create and establish the foundation for peace, which I'm afraid does not exist. It has to. That foundational task remains. I'm afraid Donald J. Trump is not the right person to do that. Sensible people from both sides have to come together and say, well, all this diabolic religiosity has only resulted in so much bloodshed. Enough is enough. Let's now really confront the truth. We have one common heritage. We are all children of the same God. In fact, we are the children of the same patriarchal stock, Abraham. And maybe it's the quarrels between brothers that's the hardest to settle. Thank you. All the very best.